Hey everybody, uh, thanks for your patience with me setting up this webinar here. Um, I'm going to go ahead and get started, even though it's 12:59, not 1 o'clock, because we've got some people logging in and I know that you're all very busy. So the platform we're using today is called Zoom. It's like any other sort of online meeting webinar thing. I just want to let you guys know there's a little button down on your bar at the bottom that says chat. If you click that, it opens up a chat box. I think everybody's muted right now, but you can type in thoughts or questions as we go along. And when we get to the end, we'll make sure that if we haven't addressed them, we'll go back and do it, or we'll unmute if there's a small enough audience. I don't want it to be like a crazy cacophony of everyone talking at once. So thanks for joining us today. I'm sitting here with Akiima Price. And what we wanted to pull all of you together, everyone who's sort of invited to this, or folks who were maybe participating in the Year of the Anacostia last year, or groups who are part of the Anacostia Park and Community Collaborative. It's sort of a mix of people who are interested or actively engaged in some kind of programming in or along Anacostia Park or the Anacostia River, either doing environmental programming and education or recreation, or working in the communities that live along the park. And Akiima and I want to talk a little bit about what we and our sort of different partner networks are building up to kind of dig into doing more effective and meaningful engagement through all of our programming over the next year and hopefully coming years. So on the slide, you can see here, this is who's talking. So I'm Erin, Garnaas-Holmes. I'm the ambassador to our Anacostia Watershed Urban Waters Partnership, which is an EPA-funded position. My job is essentially to help connect community organizations and residents to government efforts for cleaning up the river and sort of maximizing its value to folks. And Akiima is sitting next to me. I'll let her introduce herself.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Akiima Price, and you may or may not know, I'm serving currently as the Anacostia Community Liaison. And this is through a grant with the National Park Foundation. And I'm the liaison to the National Park Service and liaisoning with the community, specifically Wards 7 and 8. And my portfolio specifically focuses on Anacostia Park, which includes the Anacostia Park proper, River Terrace Park, Kenilworth Park and Aquatic Gardens, and the lovely Frederick Douglass Home. And my job, again, is kind of to just be on board to help build these relationships, but ultimately helping stand up a friends group for Anacostia Park, which is really exciting. So I'm glad to be doing this work.
So here's an agenda for what we're going to go over for. This might take the whole hour. It might take a little less, and we can all break early. We're going to try to do a little icebreaker instead of having a round robin of introductions. We've got about 20 people on here right now. We're instead going to try to do a poll thing where you answer questions that pop up to get a sense of who's here on the digital room. And then we're going to talk about what do we mean when we're talking about meaningful engagement, and kind of do an introduction to the frame that we're talking about today. I'm going to talk briefly about the Anacostia Park and Community Collaborative. I think most of you, I'm looking at the names here, most of you know who that is, but I'll still introduce it for everybody. And then Akiima is going to talk a little bit more about the work that she's doing with the National Park Foundation and Park Service to really provide bones and structure around building a community of practice, or a network around kind of gearing engagement and events and programming towards meaningfully engaging Ward 7 and 8 residents. And then we'll see if we can break open into a sort of question session at the end. So here is my attempt to use this platform to deliver a poll. I'm going to hit a button and something should pop up in front of you. There are 5 questions, I think. So the question in front of you should ask, what's the focus of your work? And you can, I think, select multiple answers. Oh, I see, it's popping up all 5 questions at once. So go down the list, take your time, I'll walk through what you're looking at. One of them is, what's the focus of your work? The next question is, how long have you been in your field? And then the third question is, what geography do you work in or with? So like, are you DC wide? Are you a national organization? Are you just focused on Ward 7 and 8? And then the last two questions are about sort of, well, two different questions. 4 is about, have you worked with folks that are have experienced trauma before? And then the last question is sort of it makes you pick one. I know many of you probably want to pick more than one, but which is most prioritized by your job functions, planet, places, or people? And I'm sorry, but you have to pick one, just to see. So I can see on my end here that some of you guys have completed this thing. About 8 out of the 21 folks online right now have finished. So I'm going to give you a few more minutes, and I can share the results with you once everybody has completed it. So if you haven't finished yet, click through the last questions. We've got a lot of environmental protection folks, I'll say that, and some folks who are focused on neighborhood development and equitable development. I'm going to give you 15 seconds left to finish the poll if you haven't. Maybe 20 seconds because a couple more people are filling it out. We've got not a lot of newbies on the phone.
I see, wow. Oh, geez.
Okay, 10 more seconds and then I got to show you these results. We've got a lot of people with more than 5 years experience on the phone.
Yeah.
And a good split between folks who are working on planet issues, place issues, or people issues. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, I'm gonna hit end polling and share the results with you. So you guys can see it now. I believe it's popped up in front of you. You can scroll down. People have answered this question. So we've got a lot of folks about a natural space corridor, a lot of education folks, not so many social justice, social service folks, but some people focused on neighborhood development. Like I said, we got a lot of sort of mid and higher career folks in question number 2. A lot of DC focused groups, although some who are just focused on Ward 7 and 8. Not a lot of experience working with people who have experienced trauma in your daily jobs. And then a good split between planet, place, and people. Most people put people,
Awesome.
Which is great. Of course, the point of that question was kind of to say that you can't work on place and planet without working on people, and you're not really working with people unless you're taking the place into context and the planet into context, which is kind of what we want to talk about today. So I think I'm gonna make the poll result disappear, and we're going to close this. So that's sort of what we want to talk about today, was that last question about how you have to put your work into context a little bit. So that's what we kind of mean with meaningful engagement. So before I get into meaningful engagement, I just want to talk about Anacostia Park. I think everybody on the line here knows what we're talking about. Here's an illustrative map. We're talking about the whole part of Anacostia Park, and honestly some of the adjacent non-federal parts too. It's this network of open space along the Anacostia River. We have this huge amenity of this gorgeous waterfront that I hope have all been on a boat trip and seen the best parts of. We have, the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens, which is like a gem of our whole nation, the only national park that grows these water lilies and lotuses. We have the skating pavilion, which is also a unique gem that we have right here in DC. And when you add it all up together, we've got over 1,200 acres of parkland, which if you add that up, it's actually way bigger than Central Park in New York. So if you've ever been to New York and you think of how much stuff there is sort of available to people and what's going on in Central Park, and the role that plays in the community in New York. I mean, obviously it's a different setting and we don't necessarily want a bunch of the horse-drawn carriages going up and down Anacostia River, but the sense of potential, I think, is there. But it's impossible to talk about this great amenity in DC without talking about the sort of social and economic context. And all of you know this, you work in DC, you know that there's sort of east of the river and the rest of DC, and that there's a difference in all sorts of like statistical metrics, household income, childhood poverty. What Akiima and I have been really focused on is the number of the health indicators. So this blue map here on the left, The darker blue it is, essentially the more health problems there are. And it's compared with the racial map on the right across the city. So the reason that we're bringing up this thing that you all kind of already know is to say that you can't really talk about the great amenity and opportunity of Anacostia Park and the river without taking the social and economic context into consideration. And I think there's sort of two reasons that that's important. One is that if you kind of ignore the social context or the economic context in your work, you're sort of, I won't say you, I say when I ignore it, I'm kind of perpetuating that a little bit by not acknowledging that that's part of the context in which I'm working. And the other sort of challenge with ignoring the context is that you're ignoring the huge opportunity that park space could play in actually addressing a lot of these disparities. And that's sort of where we're coming from, is this sense of opportunity that the Anacostia River corridor can play in addressing real issues that people are facing. And that's where I want to introduce the Anacostia Park and Community Collaborative. For those of you that don't know the group, shorthand is APAC, APACC. That's sort of where this network of organizations has come from. So currently there are some 28 members of APAC, but it's really a network for anybody that wants to come through this lens to work on stuff in the river corridor. With the sort of shared goal to maximize the value of this asset along the river, but for Ward 7 and 8 residents in the District of Columbia sort of specifically. And so it's a mixture of organizations. We have maybe 50% kind of environmental organizations and then 50% more community focused organizations. Sort of recognizing that the park kind of plays a role in communities and communities play a role in the park. And so, we are intentionally bringing together these two different types of organizations, but part of what we're doing is also trying to elevate some of the community voices that have historically not really been part of the river conversation or part of the planning conversation along the river. And the ultimate goal is really to build all of our collective capacity to kind of work together on these issues. Those of you that work on the river corridor know that there are like 85 different organizations that do some kind of work, either recreation focused work or community organizing, or they actually manage some part of the river. And we're trying to sort of create a table where we're all kind of getting on the same page. And really trying to make sure that the focus of getting together on the same page is creating a river corridor that supports the social, mental, physical, spiritual, and economic health of folks who live right along this river. So that's sort of the goal of APAC. My slides aren't advancing, so hold on a second. Here we go. So what the group has been up to, and here's some videos should be coming in on your screen. We've kind of been working on a lot of different things over the past 3 years, some of which has been really focused on planning conversations. APAC hosted a conversation for the National Park Service when it released its general management plan in 2017. And then in 2018, a lot of our members were involved in the Resilient DC working groups, which was exploring, how can the river be sort of a better asset to DC residents. The top left video there, we had some members out with the Office of Planning, where we biked up and down the river and took different modes of transportation and talked about access issues. But we also participate in each other's events. So, when the 11th Street Bridge Park has River Festival, we have our members show up to that. Or when the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens, the Friends group there, hosts music events and jazz nights, we try to show up with some of our programming so that we're all kind of getting involved in each other's work. And of course, we have meetings in the bottom right. We've been meeting monthly for the past 3 years, and we're kind of holding back on meetings and trying to meet less and do more. And so we're trying to focus more on doing this kind of shared, actual on the ground work with each other. And part of that is that we've all kind of come around to this agreement that what we're doing together is kind of building a community-based vision for the Anacostia River corridor. And this is really just giving name to the work that these groups have already been doing. But the way we look at this is that there are a lot of different government agencies who are responsible for a lot of different parts of this river. The National Park Service manages most of the open space, but there's a lot of other people responsible for, transportation or for programming and events and for what's going on in the neighborhoods. And there isn't one body that runs everything. And so what we're trying to do is build more of a consensus sort of community list of priorities that can kind of be like ground truthing all of the different work that's going on along the river. And we've identified that there's maybe these 5 categories on the screen that we've sort of seen in our work, our different topics that we've kind of glommed around. And so we're going to try to sort of give more structure to these throughout the next year. But what we're here today, this is sort of providing context for why we're here today. We're here to talk about the programming, events, and outreach. So Akiima, with her work with the National Park Service and Foundation, is sort of helping to work with APAC to build up this sort of community of practice under these banners to talk about how programming, events, and outreach that's happening along the corridor can sort of be a little more coordinated, but also really be grounded in this service to the community. So what APAC is sort of offering to do for all of its members and all of you, even if you aren't technically a voting member, we want to really open up participation in this. So we're going to be hosting a shared calendar of events on the Anacostia Park community website, which we are just launching right now. For those of you that participated in the Year of the Anacostia, this may look familiar. And yes, we're sort of continuing that same model where we can collect all of the boat tours and concerts and recreation events and cultural things happening, put them in one place so that we can, if somebody just wants to know what's going on in my backyard park tomorrow or this weekend, they can find that. And after the Year of the Anacostia steering committee meetings last year, which many of you participated in, sort of a consensus that we still wanted to keep up that coordination, but that a meeting every month was a bit much. And so one of the things that we're launching is a shared Facebook group for practitioners, for folks like you. I know Facebook, it's like there's no perfect platform, but there are many people who are on Facebook and who are putting our events on there. And so it's like a good starting point to at least build a little community where we are sharing information back and forth. We can tell each other about events that are coming up or about, discuss things that we heard, the things that were happening in those Year of the Anacostia meetings, some of which can happen online and over the course of time. And then the last thing that we're hosting through APAC are some actual in-person meetings still. So we want to host some quarterly capacity building kind of coordination meetings. And these will be somewhat like the Year of the Anacostia meetings, but actually grounded more in having some kind of theme or someone present to kind of teach us something new while we're there. So it's sort of like our organizations can grow a little bit while we're participating in this and not just sort of announcing our events to the group. And so while this is sort of a calendar here on your screen, over the next year or so, while we're doing this online calendar work and all of that, we'll have these sort of quarterly meetings. And we've lined up for the first one this fall. We've got the National Council for Behavioral Health coming. And these are, experts on sort of mental health, and they're gonna help us do a training on trauma-informed community engagement in the context of us coordinating our events and programming and outreach. And the reason for this is, we're all sort of coming from different places. In that poll at the beginning here, a lot of folks, 70% or something, are involved in environmental work. And we're not always trained in environmental organizations how to interact with people who have experienced trauma in their daily lives. But there's a lot of value probably in the work that we're doing if we can all sort of train ourselves up on how to engage with folks who are dealing with issues in their daily lives, which is a lot of the stress populations in wards 7 and 8 that we want to be working with. So to dig into that topic, really, I'm going to stop talking now and hand this over to Akiima Price to talk about, at the same time as we kind of open this up, that sort of stuff that APAC is going to be doing. Akiima is going to be bringing together a smaller sort of focused cohort to dig into meaningful engagement.
Thank you, Erin. Great job. Hi, everybody. I'm really glad you guys are sharing your time with us today and interested in what we're doing. So this meaningful engagement cohort is basically a team of people that, you're invited to come in, but the basic kind of thing that we're trying to do is actually create programming in Anacostia Park. So I'll look at, your existing programming and look at kind of what that could look like engaging Ward 7-8 residents in our park, and specifically people from social service programs that we've been consciously building relationships with over the last year to bring into the park to start to, like we mentioned, kind of be at the same time addressing these bigger issues they may be having in their lives, but on the surface looks like a park experience, but kind of feels kind of transformative. And so we all know the health benefits of nature. I think there's a countless body of research out there that makes the case for experiences in nature, for just kind of being quiet in nature, kids being able to run in nature. So it's not a hard sell, but I think what we need to do in terms of, with Anacostia Park is to kind of bring it around to like, what does that really look like in actual practice? Because in theory, we all know this. And so in my experience, I've been doing environmental education for 20 plus years. And, in the last 10 years have really been kind of looking more so at this meaningful engagement lens, because I think the word environment in mainstream does refer to trees and grass, but in the larger conversation, there's home environments. There's, if I said Erin is an advocate of his environment versus Erin is a product of his environment, you kind of get the two contexts for what that means. And so this work is really kind of looking at the middle of that and looking at kind of these stressed people, like what are the bigger needs they have, and that we don't necessarily have to feel accountable to meeting. Like, for example, residents have their basic needs met. These are some outcomes I've worked with in the past in some of my work with the DC Promise Neighborhood Initiative, but still kind of apply in my daily work with this. This is kind of my inner filter, but like that residents have their basic needs met, which could look like something simple as you ensuring that you have snacks at your events. It's and also this opportunity through this cohort, you'll have a chance to hold hands with actual social service groups whose mission is focused on that. So you're holding hands with social workers, you're holding hands with other folks who are focused on that and can bring that to the table. Some of these other pieces include, residents begin to take on leadership roles. I think a lot of us already do that, but maybe underestimate the power of that and what that may mean to that person. And also kind of the affective side of this. So those of you that, say, for example, if AWS is on the call and you do these boat trips, people go home and think about this. And those are like super transformative. But for AWS, you may not see that or recognize that and how that may help that person get through another situation. So just how, and as we are more conscious of this, we hold hands with people that maybe are working with them and see that benefit in other ways that can kind of capitalize on that and keep it going, so that these meaningful experiences don't just live on that boat on the river, but take form in the form of courage, self-esteem, and these other things. Some of these other things are like parents can provide financial stability to children. Obviously, the ideal situation will be, you're talking about employment, but jobs aren't just that easy to give away, but something as small as stipends, or when we think about giving people gift cards, or just, the incentives that we sometimes can make available to people for, not just kind of trying to put a carrot in front of them, but these people actually have bills to pay and need food. And those are things that can also help build skills that maybe in the future can help them toward this bigger goal. And again, not making you feel like you're accountable to making these goals happen or that you have to start weaving these into your mission, but just in the consideration of meaningful engagement. These are some of the things that are going on behind the scenes for some of these people that you're trying to get to come into your program. On the right side, you'll see some samples of some programming of, examples of meaningful engagement programming that I've been doing with the Friends of Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens and the National Park Service at the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens. This is from Nature Fest, which kind of like APAC is not really a program. It's kind of a strategy and experience. It's just us being very intentional about, and considering these outcomes on the side of how to engage people meaningfully at Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens. And it's been going now. We just had our 5th spring break. And I've learned a lot of best practices from that I'll be sharing with this cohort. So the way that this will map out, and if we go to the next slide, the way that'll map out is that we will start looking at, again, your network of people that you're trying to reach and kind of what are some of the issues that they're up against. And if you're talking about Ward 7 and 8, these are some of the key players out there that are focused on the health and well-being of Ward 7 and 8 residents. And so what I've been doing for the past year as this liaison has been working on relationships with these organizations and how they could see the park and park experiences as a resource in their continuum of care to individuals from Ward 7 and 8. And so as Erin mentioned, we've got the National Council for Behavioral Health. And even behind these partners, there's a whole nother network of people and resources behind them. The Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which houses a tremendous group of people, which include, the Department of Victim Services and Justice Grants, who does some amazing work around trying to help reentering parents. And their focus is really on mental health. We've got the National Reentry Network, and so on. And so these partners represent some bigger conversations where I've been able to collect this information around, like, what are some of the immediate concerns and what are some of their interests as social service groups. And so I think everybody is very well aware of just the epidemic of gun violence going on. And unfortunately, specifically, most times it seems like it's happening more east of the river. But our residents right outside the park are being impacted by this. So how can we think about Anacostia Park as not necessarily stopping it, but how can we support people who are impacted by that? And so some of the things that we've found on the side after having these conversations with people were some of the interests that came to the top. Like, for example, the National Reentry Network is interested in hosting family reunification circles and restorative justice circles, which is pretty just add water. They bring the professionals. We just make sure they have the permit to use the park for that day. But some of this will involve co-creating curriculum, which comes back to what we'd like to do with you and as a part of this cohort. How can your existing programs materialize in the form of programs in Anacostia Park that are helping meet mental health, physical health, social well-being, and spiritual health? And these being the cornerstones of the Healthy Parks, Healthy People program of the National Park Service, which is a great initiative that is just what we're talking about. How can people have these transformative experiences in our parks? And there's also the Parks Prescription Program that maybe some of you have heard of, which centers around working with doctors. In DC specifically, they've been working with the Unity Health Clinics, but having doctors and practitioners prescribe time in nature. And we want to specifically have that happen, prescribing time in Anacostia Park, but also how can we open up that audience of providers to include people like probation officers, social workers, like how can they quote unquote prescribe experiences in the park? And so I've been working with them to kind of think about what those experiences look like. And these down here capture some of that as well. So they're interested in walking and talking groups, running groups, even forest bathing is out there now as this fad, and people are kind of going, what is that? I'm interested. Something as simple as cookouts as well, sports. So through this cohort, we'll dig deeper on this. Because this is where your work lives. Ideally, again, if we have somebody on the call from Anacostia Watershed Society, you do boat trips. Through this, we can build, we can match you up with some of these groups, like a father's group from Martha's Table, and help start to populate your events and your opportunities with the people who could really use them on a bigger level. And also behind this is also, we're not working just necessarily directly with the people themselves. We're working with the organizations that are, have the grants and whose missions are all centered around mental health. So there are kind of liaison in the in-between that make sure that the people come to your events, that they know about your events. They're the ones that can even better inform us as we build this work, because we'll be co-creating. So for example, Casey Trees, if you're on the call, one of the things I'd like to do with the cohort is, pull together some of your best activities that you do. And we'll actually look at them kind of on a deeper level and say, how could this be even more engaging? Like, is it for people that can't read? Like, have we considered these other measures of engagement? And then you're going to be ground truthing them actually with us as we get on the ground through these different events and these sites, through this next set of activities. We've got these 6 events lined up between now and November. And so as we start to look at your programs and kind of what you'd like to bring to Anacostia Park programming, you'll get a chance to actually ground truth it with real life people. And in the process of that, get the feedback necessary. So we go back to the drawing board and spend the winter kind of, creating and building the physical, tangible game cards and so forth, that by the spring, we'll have this library of activities and resources that we can then train parents from some of these organizations. I know that there's a group of parents at the National Reentry Network that are very interested in learning how to lead time with their families in the park. So these activities that we co-create together will become these future resources for parents to be leaders in the eyes of their children, for fathers and mothers coming home from prison who need, increased hours with their families to get a letter for a judge to get access to their kids. There's powerful transformative opportunities in nature-based experiences and programming. And this cohort is kind of like like it says here, an online course, online classroom, where there'll be some method to the madness, but it'll also be dependent on kind of what we build together as a group. I do know, some of this will include you attending some of these events, just even without promoting your event, just learning the value of being present, working at the arts and crafts table, just to start having conversations with community members, so that you can start to also build your own relationships. That's a really important outcome that I'm focused on, is helping you, amplify your work and grow your networks of relationship with Ward 7 and 8 residents. Because I've heard from a lot of people that, you have these great programs, but a lot of times you don't have the relationships or the people attending these. And I think, through working through these programs in Anacostia Park, that will totally increase your capacity to do this in other places outside the park. And even just, again, having the perspective from that lens, but also having the network and relationship with the people who are doing this work. And so if you are interested in signing up for this cohort, please let us know. It will, again, be kind of a private group to this larger Facebook group, because we will be kind of doing more day-to-day, like a classroom. I've done some online courses before, so it'll be kind of a very informal online course that shares information and also prompts you to share as well.
So with that, that's really the end of our sort of introduction to what we've kind of set up between our different networks here that is coming down the line. I think the next slide just says questions. I'm going to go back up a slide though, because I think this like calendar image summarizes a lot of what we've sort of set up. And so I think the way we want to do this is, if you have any questions about this stuff, you can, bear with me a little bit on this new platform, but you can either type it in on the chat, which shows up on that bar on your screen. Or I think if you click on participants, there's a raise hand button somewhere, and then we can unmute you. But we do have somebody, Alyssa Atkinson asked, who is leading the meetings. So Akiima's leading this webinar right now, and she's also leading the smaller cohort.
Yes. So because it's through Facebook, every day there'll be a different share, and you'll be prompted to make other shares. Some of it will be as simple as watch this video and comment on it. Like, there's a great video I love to share on social capital. Some of it may be just prompted surveys to get people's feedback. What's one of your favorite icebreakers that helps you with this? And it'll also include you sharing information about yourselves, because I think there's value in us building a network amongst ourselves, whether we've worked together or not. But we all need this kind of support. Although I'll be leading this, and I do have some experience in doing this work, I also think this is a chance for us to learn from each other. None of us have all the right answers. And so I would hope to see this cohort really grow and expand beyond just this 6-month thing, and possibly, grow to include other people. I have something but similar through Facebook called the Urban EE Collective. I manage a network of almost 3,000 environmental educators internationally, but mainly from the United States of America. But it's a really great platform, kind of, again, to do that day-to-day sharing. But specifically with this group, with you guys, it'll be kind of more personal, one-on-one, depending on how many people sign up. But yes, it'll be day-to-day.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, no real, you won't be graded.
Right.
There are no wrong answers, but you will be prompted. And I'll also be doing some offline meetings with folks. So, if we identify that, again, Casey Trees, if you're on the call, that we want, that your top 5 activities are, tree icebreaker, this, that, we'll meet in person and kind of actually play those things out. You'll pick the ones that you want to do and lead at one of our future activities. For example, we've got our late skate series coming up. And I should be sharing a flyer on this webinar, but I can send one out, and you can definitely find them on the park's website. But these are evenings where we are intentionally inviting families to come and skate, and the park's going to stay up until 9:30. And the programming we're doing is family oriented. Like the first late skate, they'll be making family crests and some other cool stuff. We'll have the humanities truck, but you yourself can be there as a volunteer, if you want to just sit at the arts and crafts table and just meet people, or if you have something like making trees, or something you want to contribute to these late skaters, to these evening events, that's what we want you to do. But we also want you to be open to, as you do it, if it doesn't work, how can we make it better? Or how can we capitalize on it? Because this is great, or I hadn't thought about it, but maybe I'll do that. I don't know, but and really, think about this as a class, that you don't have to feel like you're coming to this perfect, but that you're coming to get something out of this, like a clinic, if you will.
Yeah, and I think the idea that essentially what's in front of you on this slide is this is what Akiima and I, through our job descriptions, have the capacity to organize, but we're hoping it's more than just us hosting and people participate, but really we work together to build it. Okay, hold on, there's some more questions here. Could this group, this is from Catherine, could this group help us to tailor our messaging to residents affected by trauma? We work with our grantees, such as Riverkeeper and AWS and the River Explorers, to develop messaging, and would appreciate input on how to make these messages better resonate.
Absolutely, but I think that yes, that can happen, but I think the deeper work is that you as a practitioner and whoever is you will have more informed messaging, because you yourself will get more informed from this. And it really does tap into who you are as a person and your kind of personal values. And it's not asking people to shift their values, but it takes a certain empathy to really consider the realness to some of these, to some of the situation. It's not for you to feel bad about people or feel sad, but just kind of how to be trauma responsive just innately, so that moving down the line, any other projects you do have, yes, Catherine, to give you the shorter version. Yes.
Yeah, I think that was a yes. And then Krista made a comment that she's got books, copies of her book, River of Redemption, that she could donate to this engagement.
Krista, she's just amazing. Are you real? You're just so amazing. Thank you so much. We'd love to have copies of your books for people that don't, and or have maybe copies for the some of the folks at the late skates. And Krista, we can talk offline, because I know we talked in the past when this was just a dream, but having some of your pictures and having you at some of these late skates or these family day events, I think would be amazing, because your pictures speak to everyone and anyone, I think, that can see.
I think that another sort of, if you don't have a question per se, but are sort of dwelling on all this and thinking, how does this fit into my job for the next 6 months or whatever, and you have feedback on how the work that we're trying to organize could work better with what you're doing. I mean, essentially just send either Akiima and or I emails, and we'd love to have that discussion. We want to make this something that, okay, send it to me, Akiima.
Yeah, well, it's because I don't want to divide it. Just send
it to me, and then we'll have a conversation about it. Because we want to make this something that, there's sort of tiers of participation in it, but we want to make it something that we can all, as the Anacostia River people who are doing stuff, feel like it's important and can fit into our work. And so if there's ways we can make this more relevant to ourselves in a logistics way, let me know. And it looks like there aren't any more questions popping up in the chat. And if you've done the raise your hand thing, I guess I can't actually see anything. So maybe no one's raised their hand, or I don't know how to do it. But that's essentially it. We wanted to give you guys an introduction to what we're sort of lining up, and we've got these, 6 events in the park every month that we're hoping can be a place to prototype some of the work that you might do with Akiima around your programming. And if you aren't able to participate in that focused cohort, at least communicate with me about, can we get your events out there and start advertising them through Apex channels. So I think the follow-up we're going to ask you to do is to get in touch with us.
Yes. I'm just, in closing, I do want to just say that, I get a lot of people that, and maybe not these exact words, but call, Ward 7-8 residents kind of hard to reach, or just east of the river hard to reach. And just with the climate of race right now, just the division and the discomfort, we cannot call anybody hard to reach if we don't take the work necessary to have the understanding of why they think the way they do, or what they do. We don't have to agree with everything, and it's not going to always be kumbaya. But the work, as an environmental person, you have a really unique opportunity to empower people on levels bigger than what benefits the planet. And I think the planet is going to be able to sustain itself to a degree without us. Whereas if we don't learn how to kind of not be hard to reach to each other and not, keep labeling ourselves hard to reach and just throw each other in different corners and not really do the work necessary to have an understanding to do this, and or just be respectful of what the history of how Ward 7 and 8 residents became stressed. We won't get that deep, maybe offline, but just without that consideration, we cannot do this work because we're going to keep having a reason not to do it. And so this will really give you a chance to kind of just tip your toe in, because even if you're not, wanting to be a part of the cohort, we still will host these events that you can attend just as a person and meet new people, because that's the other value of having these relationships with Martha's Table, National Reentry Network, and these others. They represent networks of Ward 7 and 8 residents that are looking for good times this summer. Who doesn't like a park and a grill? I'm not gonna say everybody, but so these are not gonna be hard to sell events. So we do, I'm gonna say we're promising to bring, a strong presence of Ward 7 and 8 residents to these events. So if you ever did want to kind of not be hard to reach, or have considered them hard to reach, I challenge you to experience it and just kind of to experience the humanness and oneness that comes when you're kind of just bringing this kind of work together. Okay.
So that's it. Thank you guys for joining the Zoom meeting. Please send us feedback, thoughts, questions going forward. You should have gotten the email from us for us. You have our contact information. But we'll leave this open for a little bit. So if you have other stuff, you can talk to us through this channel right now. But I think that's it. We did it in 40 minutes.
40, yep.
Thanks everybody for joining. I look forward to working with all of you.